Good morning. Our learning is Le'ilin Nishmas Mendel Mayim Ras Kamad Ruvain and Neshama Shabbat Aliyah, and it's chus for her descendants to have a good day. Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, we are on Kuf Nun Vav Amud Beis, Umid Shmuel. Right, we're at the second paragraph. We've been talking about mazel. Okay, so let's just review quickly the idea of mazel. What is mazel? Mazel is there is clearly a belief that that our natural our life is in some ways dictated by what is, if a person knows how to read the sky, knows how to read the stars, knows how to read a person's mazel, then a person could know to some degree what a person's future is going to be. And there's a big discussion about, does that apply to the Jewish people? Are Jewish people above that or not? Are we bound by those rules or not? There is some notion of things being already preordained to some degree, and what we've been discussing over here is different opinions about whether or not the Jewish people are able to override this. And what we're seeing over here, and we'll see further today, is that the predominant view is that for the Jewish people, this principle does not apply. The notion of mazel does not apply. And when we say does not apply, it means, we'll see what it means clearly is as follows. What it means is that it does naturally apply, but there's an ability to override it. In other words, we are natural. There could be something which we're predestined to happen to us. What it means when we say ein mazel Yisrael, what that means is that we have the ability through our good deeds to override it. Through our good deeds, we're able to somehow bypass what maybe should have happened based on good deeds. Okay, we'll see some good examples of that today. Say fine. Shmuel nami ein mazel Yisrael. We see also from Shmuel that there is no that mazel does not have, again, like absolute sway over the Jewish people, that a person is able to override it. So let's see. The Shmuel v'Avleit havu yasvei. Shmuel apparently was like friendly with this individual Avleit, who was a non-Jew astrologer. They were sitting together one day. Two people were going to the swamp to cut reeds. Amalei Avleit l'Shmuel. Avleit turns to Shmuel and says, "Hi Gavra Azov lo'asi." This man's going to go and he's not going to come back. Tarik le'chivya umayis. The snake is going to bite him and kill him. Okay. Amalei Shmuel. Shmuel says to Avleit, "Ibar Yisrael hu." If he's a Jew, Azov asi, he's going to go and he's going to come back. Okay, so what happens? While they're sitting there, the man they go and they come back. So come Avleit Shadi Latunye. So Avleit stood up and he took off the pack of reeds from the guy's back. Ashkach bechivya difsik ushti betarte gove. And sure enough, they find a snake that had been cut into two pieces. Okay, so Avleit was onto something, but the snake, instead of biting him, the snake was killed seemingly right before, right? Imagine you're picking up reeds and there's snakes like through it, and right before he could have been bitten, it seems like somehow the snake was cut into two. Okay, so Amalei Shmuel says to the man, Mayavata, what do you do? Like, what merit do you have that maybe saved you from the being killed by the snake? Amalei, he said to him, Kol yoma have mar minan rifta behade hadari v'achlinan. Every day we would throw our bread together in one basket and eat it. In other words, everyone had to bring lunch from home, and then they would put it in a basket together, like to hold on to it, and then when it comes to lunchtime, everyone would take their stuff back. Okay, but you have to put in if you want to take back out, right? So ha'inna have ika chad minan delo have rifta. Today, I saw that there was one person who didn't have any bread to throw in. Havika michsaf, and he was growing embarrassed. Amina lahu, I told them, Ana ka'imna varmina. Today, I'm going to be the one who's collecting the bread. Ki matai legabe, when I came to that person, shavai nafshai kamad shkil minei. I pretended to take something from him. Okay, instead I threw in my own bread. Okay, so instead of taking his bread, he had nothing to take. So I pretended to take it from him. Oh, thank you so much. And I took my own bread and put it in to save him from embarrassment. So you wouldn't be embarrassed. Amrlei, Shmuel said to him, Mitzvah v'avta, you did a mitzvah. You did a beautiful thing. Nafik Shmuel v'dar. Shmuel went out and expounded, and he said, Tzedakah tatzam mavis. And tzedakah, charity, saves from death. Does not only mean that it saves a person, that when a person's supposed to die, meaning when a person has a predestined time to die, that instead of dying a more horrible death, they'll have a less difficult death. Ella mimisa atzma. We see it saves from death itself. A person was supposed to die this day. The snake was clearly supposed to bite them, but because the person did charity, because the person did chesed, it was able to save the person from dying on that day. Okay? We see from a story of the Bekiva that he also clearly that's what Shmuel was saying. If he's Jewish, meaning and clearly and that's the implication of the story that he was Jewish.
You don't see that from the circumstance of what happened.
Nothing about the circumstance, but Shmuel was saying when Avleit said he's going to die, Shmuel's saying if he's Jewish, in other words, if he's no, you're wrong, because since this guy is Jewish, that's essentially what he was conveying.
It wasn't enough just that he was Jewish. There had to be some sort of...
Correct. Again, that's what I was emphasizing before. Exactly. It's not just the notion of a Mazel Yisrael does not mean that the rules don't apply to us whatsoever. What it means is that we have the ability through our mitzvos to override Mazel. Exactly, and that's what we're going to see from the next story as well. Rabbi Kiva Nami Ein Mazel Yisrael. We see also from Rabbi Kiva that there's no Mazel Yisrael. Rabbi Kiva Havile Barta. He had a daughter. Amar Le Kaldai. Astrologers told him Hahu Yoma Da'ila Le Genana. The day that she is going to get married. Tarik LeChivya Umisa. She's going to be bitten by a snake and will die. Remember, keep in mind, we spoke about this earlier. Snakes were quite common back in the day, right? Talk about uncovered water back in the day, so that's why these stories keep on coming back to snakes. Havidi Iga Amilsa, Tuva, Rabbi Kiva was very worried. Hahu Yoma Shekalta Lemachbanta. On the day of her wedding, she took her brooch, danced the begud, and stuck it in the wall. Okay, keep in mind, they didn't have shelves and stuff like we have, so if she had a brooch with had like a blade at the end, like a pin, right? She stick it in the wall to keep it there until the next day. And when she did so, the needle lodged in the eye of a snake and killed it. Okay, she didn't realize this. In the morning, she took the brooch out. A dead snake followed. Okay, a little gruesome, but also clearly indicating to her that her life was saved. She was supposed to get killed by the snake in the middle of the night, and instead the snake is killed. When her father heard about this, he said to her, Kiva said to her, Ma'avato, what did you do? Amrle, she said to him, Bifanya asa anya kara abava. In the afternoon, a poor person came and called by the doorway. Vavitride kuli alma bisudasa. Everyone's busy getting ready, getting the suda for the wedding ready, right? And of course, I was sitting there getting ready as well, busy. Vavitride kuli alma bisudasa. Everyone's busy getting ready. V'leika deshmata. No one even heard him. Ke'imna shakalti liristinai dihavisli. And I took the food that was given to me. She was probably given a nice portion for her wedding. She took her portion, and I gave it to the poor person. Amr Allah, Rekiva said to her, Mitzvah vata, you did a mitzvah. Nafik Rekiva Darsh, Rekiva went out and proclaimed to his followers, Utsaka Tasim Lavis, and charity saves from death. And again, not just from an unusual death, meaning at a time that a person should die, it impacts what type of death. El Misa Atma could change the day of death because of these mitzvahs.
It's a very famous story, right?
It is indeed, yes. Yeah.
Rabbi, we don't think like that these days. We don't if something good happens to us, we're like, oh, it's because I did this. It's very, we don't really do we? Is that what our thoughts are?
I'm not sure if there's something problematic with the thought, meaning, I want to understand, what do you mean by
Meaning let's say I have a good day at business, I'm like, oh, it's because I was kind to this person, or I was good, it feels like, oh, I'm so great, I know, I thought we don't try to pretend that we know what Hashem's thinking.
Right, we certainly don't know, it's a delicate balancing act. We're not proclaiming that we know exactly what Hashem is thinking. Something incredible happens, the same, we are supposed to be introspective, we're supposed to be saying, hey, why do these things happen, why do things not happen, we're supposed to, we're supposed to I believe there's a humility that probably is the right approach. Saying, if something bad happens, we could try to introspect. We could say, maybe I'm doing this wrong. I should try to do these things better. Do I say it definitively and say, I know this is why Hashem does something? I think that's presumptuous. When something good happens, when something amazing happens, we can ask ourselves, is there some merit? Do I know definitively? I don't know definitively, but I can ask myself, was there something good that maybe caused this? It's a fair question to ask. To say definitively, 100%. But when something incredible happens, to ignore it, right? Meaning we have to do something, right? We certainly have to do, hodaya. We have to properly thank Hashem. But at the same time, to ask and just consider, I think has some value. Okay. We have the story from Rav Nachman Yitzchak, another famous story. The astrologers once told Rav Nachman Yitzchak's mother, your son is going to be a thief. So what she did was she never allowed him to uncover his head. Right? She said, you have to wear something on your head all the time. A yarmulke. She told him, cover your head so that the fear of heaven will be upon you, right? This is where they get the term yarmulke, yare malka. The term yarmulke is made up of the two words that it'll have a fear of heaven. Okay? Uvay rachme, and pray for God's mercy that the evil inclination shall not dominate you. Lo hava yada amai ka'amrle. He never knew why she told him this. Yom echad, one day, Yasif kagaras tusei dikla. He was studying under a palm tree. Nafal glima milavei reisha, and the cloak fell off his head. Dale ene chaz ladiki, he lifted his eyes, saw the palm tree. Alme Yitzre, his evil inclination overpowered him. Salik Paskal Kibur Bishine, he went up and chopped off a cluster of dates with his teeth. So you see, he had this complete drive to go ahead and to steal, and it was his yarmulke that was holding him back. We're going in just for a moment about the halachos of yarmulke. You see from a story like this, that is there an obligation to wear yarmulke? Thoughts from a story like this? Is there an absolute obligation? Doesn't sound like it, right? It sounds like his mother was doing something extra. Many of the poskim say, you see clearly that there was no obligation to wear yarmulke, although there's some discussion maybe by tefillah. There may have been an absolute obligation. There you do find the Gemara is already talking about needing to wear a head covering for men while they daven, but you see from a story like this, maybe yes, maybe no, although he was studying, so there's some discussion. Even by studying there wasn't an obligation, right? Because he's studying, and clearly this is something which is that his mother. Okay, so that in itself is not so definitive, but the point is that many posts can come out saying that there is not an obligation to wear a yarmulke. The Taz, the Shulchan Aruch rules that you should wear a yarmulke. The Taz says that no, nowadays because it's become like a Jewish practice, it's almost like it becomes like since it's a Jewish practice, it becomes like an absolute obligation. Ramosha and others push back on this, saying no, the way the Taz says it is that it's that we don't emulate the non-Jews. Okay, the way there's a halacha that if the non-Jews are doing one thing, we should do something different. And the Taz says this is one of the examples. Ramosha says that's not true. He says that's only true when it's something where they're doing something which might be like it has something intrinsically problematic with it, like something promiscuous or something that's idolatrous. Okay, there we say we're not going to be like them. But he's like, if a non-Jewish nurse, doctor wears scrubs, like what Jews are not supposed to wear scrubs, like what are you talking about? Like that doesn't make sense. Therefore, Moshe says it's not an obligation. It's certainly a very important minhag. You should do it. But Ramosha and other poskim do come out with some leniencies based on that. But it certainly is the ideal thing to do, and we see the effect that having a yarmulke on our head certainly could have. Okay, fine. Let's go a little further. Okay, so we're going to revisit one of our ongoing machloksim in the entire Masechta between Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Shimon about the extent of muktzah. Okay, so one opinion says that we are very expansive in terms of what is allowed to be moved on Shabbos, and one has a much more limited approach. Do you remember which one's which? Who has a more limited approach? Who has a more expansive one? Let's see if my mnemonics worked. Rav Shimon had the more expansive one. Right? Why? Because the shin, right? Excellent. The yud. Okay, small and contained. Thank God. Okay. It also means shah. Very good. I'll hold you to that, Max. Okay, so what do we see? So over here, the discussion is about things that were not thought about, things which were not thought about to be used for Shabbos. Okay, meaning it's not like something which typically can't be used, but things which you didn't plan on using for Shabbos. Okay, so let's see the examples. Says the Mishnah, a person's allowed to cut up gourds before an animal on Shabbos to eat them. Okay, gourds are something which are typically human food. You're allowed, so gourds are human food. Human food is set aside for use on Shabbos. You're allowed to cut them up before an animal to use to eat on Shabbos as well. There's an avail of klavim, and you're allowed to cut up a carcass of, let's say, a cow. Cow drops dead on Shabbos. You're allowed to cut it up for the dogs to eat it, according to the Tanakama. If it was still alive when Shabbos began, then what's a typical cow? Is it something you're going to feed animals? No. A typical cow you're going to use for human food, right? You're going to shech it, you're going to slaughter. Why would you give it to a dog, right? So it's something which is fit for human consumption, and therefore not something you would want to give to an animal. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, who has the more limited view of muktzah, understands that it's not something which is set aside, prepared for animals, and therefore if it dies, unless it dies Erev Shabbos, you're not allowed to give it to a dog. If it dies on Shabbos, you can't give it to a dog. Because it wasn't prepared for dog's use. Again, you see his more limited view of what can be used on Shabbos. Okay, Itmar, now we have a big discussion about who the halacha is like. Okay, it's been stated. Okay, Amr Ula, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Va'af Rav Savar Halach Rabbi Yehuda. Rav also holds the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, and we're going to midecharache dezuze. We see this from the halacha regarding ship's mats. Okay, ship's mats. What that means is that when they would travel on a ship, they would have these mats that would cover all of the cargo, and they were designated for covering the cargo. Now it's a mat. It's something you can use this mat if you want. You can use this mat and go to sleep on it, right? It's just a mat. But the point is, this mat was set aside. This mat was typically used for covering cargo, right? And therefore, it's not designated for regular person use, okay? To Rav Asar Shmuel Shari, Rav said it's not allowed to be used. If it's not allowed to be used, so what's it called? So that right. So if it's not allowed to be used, you see that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda in the sense that since it wasn't prepared for other uses. Therefore, it's muktzah. Vaf Levi savar halacha Rabbi Yehuda. Levi also holds halachas like Rabbi Yehuda. Ki ad Levi. We have the following from Levi. Kevin Maisi treifsa lekamevi yom tova. When they would bring a potential treifa before a yom tov. Okay, though one of the main jobs of a rabbi back in the day was to decide if an animal was kosher or not. Baruch Hashem for the 21st century. Okay, so the bottom line is they would bring them like a carcass. They would bring them an animal that was shechted, right? And they would say, "Is this kosher?" And the rabbi would have to go and inspect it, etc., etc. So when they would bring an animal, so on Shabbos they would not be handling these animals, but on Shabbos they shechted. On Yom Tov they would shechted an animal, and they want to eat it, and they're like, "Oh, maybe it's not kosher." So he would tell them when they would bring him before him in Yom Tov something to check. He would only do so if he was sitting near a garbage dump. Okay, he would sit near, right? Basically, he would put the animal down right by the garbage dump. Okay, and why? Because the Amar Dilma Miskashra, it might not be kosher. And if it's not kosher, since it was an animal that was supposed to be used for human consumption because it was like a cow, whatever it is, and therefore I'm not even allowed to move it on Yom Tov. If it turns out that it's muksa, I can't use it. I can't pick it up and give it to a dog because it's muksa. Because again, he clearly holds like Rav Yehuda, since it's fit for human consumption, it can't be moved over to animal consumption. Therefore, he would say, let me check by the garbage, because if it's not fit for a human, if it's a treifa, if it's a treifa, then we're just going to leave it here because it can't be handled. Right? So he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay? Says the Gemara further. Ushmuel Amar halach Rav Shimon. Shmuel says the halach is like Rav Shimon. Vav Ziri savar halach Rav Shimon. Ziri also held the halach is like Rav Shimon. It's not as taught in the Mishnah. Behema shemeisa. If an animal dies on Yom Tiv, lo yizizena b'mikoma. A person's not allowed to move it from its place. Now, this Mishnah certainly sounds like who? Like Rabbi Yehuda or Rav Shimon? Rabbi Yehuda, you can't move it at all. However, the Targuma Ziri came along and interpreted this Mishnah to mean bebehemes kadshim. We're talking about a consecrated animal that died. If it was kadshim, then it was set aside for what? For holy purposes, and therefore you wouldn't be able to eat it anyways. That's why you can't move it. But if it wasn't kadshim, if it wasn't something which was sanctified for the use in the Beis HaMikdash, if it was just a regular animal, you would be allowed to move it. So Ziri is going out of his way to interpret this Mishnah to fit with a view like Rav Shimon. Okay, if it would be a regular, ordinary animal, it would be fine. Rav Yochanan Amar Lach Rav Shimon. Rav Yochanan also said like Rav Shimon. Who asked the Gemara, Mi Amar Rav Yochanan Hachi? Did Rav Yochanan really paskin like Rav Shimon? Vam Rav Yochanan. We saw this before many times. Didn't we say from Rav Yochanan halacha kistam Mishnah? The halacha always follows an anonymous Mishnah. Rav Yochanan has a general rule: whenever a Mishnah is stam, whenever you find a ruling in a Mishnah which is not attributed to a particular individual, then what that indicates is that Rav Yehuda Hanasi, the author, the editor of the Mishnah, wanted to tell you the halacha is like this person, and Rav Yochanan was on the record saying any stam Mishnah, any anonymous Mishnah, the halacha is like that Mishnah, and it was taught in a Mishnah. It was taught in a Mishnah that what? Imevakin eitzim and akoros. You're not allowed to split wood from beams for firewood on Yom Tov, nor from a beam that broke on Yom Tov. So what does that mean? Refer to? So let's say you have regular full beams, okay, meaning like a proper, a beam that is, a full piece of wood, like a nice straight piece of wood, finely cut piece of wood. So the Mishnah says you're not allowed to cut that up for firewood. Okay, why not? Because a regular beam they would use for firewood, twigs, broken things, right? You wouldn't use something which is a regular full beam. And similarly, if let's say a beam in a house breaks on Yom Tiv, right? So before Yom Tivs began, it was set aside to hold the house up. Now it breaks. Okay, so a person says, "Oh, right, okay, it's cold. I'll use it for firewood today, right? I'm freezing." The bottom line is you can't. So according to this Mishnah, you can't do it, right? Why? Because it wasn't set aside for firewood before Yom Tov began, and this is like the halacha of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds unless it's designated for that particular purpose, it can't be transferred from one purpose to another on Yom Tov or Shabbos, and that would seem to reflect the view of Rav Yochanan. Of Rav Yehuda. And yet Rav Yochanan told us. Yet we're on the one hand we're saying the halacha is. Rav Yochanan said the halacha is like Rav Shimon. And yet here we have a Mishnah, which is anonymous, which goes like Rav Yehuda. So when it answers, Rav Yochanan ahuk Rav Yosi bar Yehuda masnile. Rav Yochanan does not consider this Mishnah to be anonymous. Rather, he had a different text which says that this opinion, that this Mishnah, he adds the words divrei Rav Yosi Rav Yehuda. The end of this Mishnah basically has Rav Yosi Rav Yehuda. Rav Yosi actually was the son of Rav Yehuda, and therefore this Mishnah is not anonymous. Rather, it's attributed to Rav Yosi Rav Yehuda, and therefore it's not an anonymous Mishnah. And therefore we can understand Rav Yochanan doesn't rule like it because it's not an anonymous Mishnah. Okay.
Yeah, it was strange that there was no quote, that it didn't say anything at the beginning of the Mishnah. Like, because if Rabbi Yehuda is coming and disagreeing, then there would have to be some sort of.
Right, but that's the point. Meaning it's an anonymous Mishnah, and now we're saying, okay, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. But you're putting that in, it makes it no longer anonymous.
Right. But because it's strange that you would have Rabbi Yehuda come and argue when we don't really have it established that who the other opinion is.
Well, there's only one opinion in this Mishnah, meaning that's what's.
Right. but we know that Rabbi Yehuda is going to be disagreeing with Rabbi Shimon, so it's a little.
The fact that there's not two opinions in this Mishnah. Right. Sometimes you have to find Mishnahs like that. Right. Okay. Tomorrow is our last longer Amud, and then Wednesday. Mirz Hashem. I still haven't sent any information on Asim. Okay, we'll make it happen.
I mean, we're finishing tomorrow, right?
No, Kufn and Zayin. So tomorrow we're gonna go through how, I don't know, whatever. We'll figure it out. I know it's a short Amud on Wednesday. Wednesday.
Just a tiny
Yeah, but Wednesday's a late day. Maybe we could just even start. Okay, we'll see.